So I was contracted by a cosmetic surgery clinic in Los Angeles to help them fix their Google ads. So I started working with them in early October. And as you can see, I know this is September. So I just want to show you the month before I started working with them. So their cost per conversion, which is cost per lead, right? They're doing inbound phone calls and form fill out submissions. They were getting those for about $356 each. Spending a total of a little over $8,000 for the month of September with a low conversion rate of 1%. So they were getting, they got 22 conversions. They're also running some Facebook ads. So that's why there's partially I guess, a partial conversion there because Google's attribution is not amazing on its own. And then as you can see here, just a couple short months later. So like I said, I started in October. Now going into December here, I was able to bring their cost per lead down to $115. I was able to over double their conversion rate and over double the budget. As you can see here, 160 conversions compared to this 22. So how did I do that? So the number one thing that I do when I start a new campaign or if I take over someone else's campaign is I monitor the traffic. So the traffic, once everything is set up, is going to be the most important thing. So, when you're spending, around $15,000 a month or so and you're in an area like Los Angeles, you're going to be getting a lot of traffic. Your cost per clicks are hopefully going to be pretty decent, depending on what you're advertising for. But long story short, there was a ton of traffic in this account. So I made thousands of negative keywords, and a lot of those were phrase and exact, because they're very specific keywords. But I also made a ton of, I call them umbrella negative keywords in their broad match. So the reason why I do that is because I don't want reoccurring terms to come to the account again, and then we pay for it, and then I make it a negative. So there's some that I want to see it. I see a trend of it. I want to catch it, and I don't ever want to see those again. So for like any kind of like local home service company, those could be like hiring or employee or DIY or how to or cost or free or cheap or any of those words. If you make those as a negative broad match, it's going to make it so those type of keywords don't come in again. So after shaping the traffic and making thousands of negative keywords, our traffic was much more dialed into what we were actually advertising for. And then now kind of going to the actual keywords itself is a lot of people in them included had a structure, right? Where they had, like some broad match keywords and this is per ad group, right? They had some broad match, some exact match, some phrase match, etc. They probably had like 15, 20 keywords per ad group. But the problem with that is those broad match keywords, just like they work with the negative keyword side, is they're as long as they're broad match, they're going to act as an umbrella. So what happens is that all of the budget goes to like one or two keywords because those broad match keywords just take all of it. And that's part of what brings in this irrelevant traffic that you have to be on top of. So I did some shifting around. I divided the campaign into multiple different campaigns to force budgets, and kind of shape this around, etc. Then the next thing I did was actually inside the campaign ad group structure. So I know I kind of just touched on that. And so part of that is what I like to call dividing and conquering. So let's say you have a campaign with 4 ad groups and only 2 of those ad groups are getting any spend. I duplicate that campaign and then give separate spend to those other ad groups that weren't spending in a new campaign to force budget. So that was part of what we did here, as well as, they just had their budgets going towards the wrong campaign. So there was other campaigns that were getting a better cost per conversion that didn't have the most of the budget. So just some simple changes like that, as well as I also cut budgets for campaigns that just, weren't seeming to work very well, or they were just very niche cosmetic surgery words that didn't have a lot of volume, and there was almost no way to actually control the traffic unless it was a very little amount, like $50 a day. And that's at this point, is not worth it because now we're spending $1,000 a day. So something to keep up with was all that. So kind of going on to there. And then the next biggest thing that you can do in any account, right? And it really depends on what type of business you are, right? If you're going for leads or e-commerce, and then it depends on how popular and how expensive are your actual clicks, right? So taking control of the bidding is the number one thing that you can do when in terms of a Google ad account. Once it's to a spot where you're like, cool, we're getting consistent results, we're seeing numbers, the traffic's good, everything is good. Like, how do we now improve the results? And it's going to be taking control of the bidding. And what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is, let's say that you're in a very small town and you run a testosterone clinic, right? Or let's say that you run a med spa and one of your services like testosterone therapy, et cetera, and you're in a small town. Let's say that there's not a lot of searches for that. So what happens is, right, you're going to have a huge chunk of the market share here, right? So imagine that, you spending $100 a day gives you like 75% of the market share, or like, let's just say 50% of the market share. And then let's just say that, inherently, naturally, CPCs are like $20. There's not much you're going to be able to do there because there's not enough market share for you to be like, hey, Google, we only want to participate in auctions where we can win clicks for $10. because right now, with your out of control campaign that's not performing, you already can't get what you want, and then there's not enough volume, there's not enough search impression share, there's not enough click share opportunity for you to tell Google that, unless you're like, hey, we want like a click a day, and you want to very, very passively, get clicks to that campaign, you totally can. But again, at a place where you're spending, $1,000 a day, like we are now with this campaign, um, is basically what you have to do is you have to take control of the bidding by using what's called a target CPA, right? So we have enough competitors, we have enough people in the area that are also bidding on the same keywords that we are. And so what we did is we just have to use a balance. Okay. So let's just say that we're getting these cost per conversion, cost per lead is $115, right? If I was to immediately go, all right, cool, this is really expensive, we're going to bring the target CPA down to $100. What would happen is now you're telling Google, hey, we only want to participate in auctions where we know we can win the click. And then we know that we can also get cost per lead, at $100 or less. So then what that does is that, Google has to formulate, okay, what's the average cost per click? What's their average conversion rate? Like, how do we make those numbers actually match up, right? So what would happen is you remove yourself from too much of the auction when you cut that too short, right? You almost you bottleneck the spend of the campaign, and then what happens is you're like, well, but that's what we want conversions for. That's what we want this for, right? But what happens is then you stop spending. So you have to find the balance between where can the account spend its full budget and where does that target CPA actually work. And then you can actually start to lower that over time as you prove it, as it starts to work, maybe as you make better landing pages or send traffic elsewhere, or as you continuously monitor that traffic and you start to sharpen and shape those results, then you can slowly lower that TCPA, by $10, right? So like right now, if I was to make an adjustment just looking at this target CPA and the budget's full spending, maybe like $105, $107 would be a good TCPA here without shocking the budget. And then week over week, you can bring that down as you take care of everything else, right? And so that was what we had to do for ours because, again, super high volume, tons of market share, really competitive area. And we have thousands of conversions in this account. There's millions of dollars spent in this account. So we are able to do that, right? But let's just say that you're like a plumber and there are some keywords that are $80, but there are also some that are 10, there's some that are 5, there's some that are 100, right? Depending on, plumber near me might be $80, but plumbers that are open at this hour in Scottsdale, Arizona, for instance, right? That might be like $5, okay? And depending on what type of keyword structure you're using, there is a chance that you're eligible for both of those keywords just based on, or I'm sorry, both of those search terms just based on the existing keywords that you have, right? So the next thing that you can do, if that's you, is instead of this target CPA move here, is you actually want to, again, well, I guess take a look at this market share, but you're going to have enough if you're something like a plumber or a locksmith in pretty much any given city. But that's where you want to take control of the CPC and you want to set it to like, let's say something like $25. Okay. If your average cost per click is $40, you want to set that to something like 30 or 35 and do the exact same strategy that I mentioned with a target CPA, but do that with your cost per click. And then all the other numbers are going to come into play as well, right? Because then what this does, when you set a maximum CPC bid limit, you tell Google, hey, right, let's say that you do the CPC goal for $25 cost per click, right? You tell Google, hey, we only want to participate in auctions where the click is no more than $25, okay? And because you have enough market share, you're able to be like, hey, we want to step away from every single, I guess, search term that triggers our keywords, and we want to be more selective, right? So depending on the type of business, depending on the actual cost per click, depending on the competition, depending on the search impression share and the overall click share, either TCPA or setting a cost per click bid limit, those are the best ways to take control of the bidding. And after you have all of this stuff figured out, this is how you get in control and you tell Google what you want. You can slowly optimize everything on the back end and on the other angles, such as the landing page, just campaign structure, dividing and conquering, like I mentioned, while also getting the best results.